Today is Friday, May 19th, 2014. My name is Jason Higgins, and I am an intern with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at the OSU Library. I'm in Stillwater to speak with Thomas Duncan regarding his life experiences, including his service during and after serving in the United States military and his time at Oklahoma State University, formerly Oklahoma A&M. This is part of the Spotlighting Oklahoma Oral History Project. Thank you for joining me today, Mr. Duncan.
Thank you.
To begin, when and where were you born?
I was born in Franklin County, Tennessee, on a farm.
On a farm.
About 10 miles from any city of a very small size.
And what year was that?
That was July 1920 I was born.
So what was it like growing up on a farm?
Well, the first 10 years were very good under the political situation and the presidents of that time. Depression hit in 1929. And the 1930s, was a very hard time.
Yes, sir.
As Oklahoma experienced in other parts of the country, we called it the Great Depression.
Yes, sir.
Money was very scarce. The bank accounts was practically non-existing. There was no cash to amount to anything. The cash money was kept in a sack or a box, and it didn't take long to count it anytime you wanted to. All through the 30s, there were very hard times. I lived on a farm, and our farming was, I guess you would call it primitive, or it was of the old nature. We used livestock, mules to pull plows and cultivators and farm equipment. It was lots of work, sun up to sundown. Food was obtained mainly from gardening, which supplied food for the summer, and my mother canned vegetables and anything that was suitable to be canned, stored it in a cellar. And generally we had plenty of food to eat. It would be what you would call common food, but even today I find it very tasty.
Such as?
Fried chicken, green beans, fresh onions in the summertime. Winter times we would kill a beef, but there was no electricity. The beef was killed and it was distributed in the community with friends, with the idea we would share a quarter beef with you, and when you butcher later, you share a quarter beef with me. About 1933 was, I think, was the hardest time. My mother made fresh biscuits every morning for breakfast, but we ran out of flour. So we had to eat cornbread or cornmeal pancakes and sorghum molasses for about a month. My dad said this is the last time we'll run out of flour. We planted 10 acres of wheat. Tennessee not being a wheat country necessarily, parts of it was, but not in our neighborhood. We planted 10 acres of wheat, harvested it, took the wheat to a flour mill that was powered by water power. I had a water wheel, and the weight of the water turned the wheel to grind the flour. No money was transferred between anyone at that time. They took a portion of the flour for the job of grinding the total amount of wheat.
Interesting.
We stacked the finished flour in big 100-pound sacks in the attic in our house and hung it from the roof, inside roof, on wires to keep the mice from getting in it, which worked. So we had fresh biscuits from then on.
Did your family trade wheat for other products that other people farmed?
Not necessarily wheat, because that wasn't our
The
product.
flour.
Our principal income was from what we call gardening or peddling fresh vegetables. We only had 90 acres to begin with. Later we bought 90 more acres. But on the 90 acres, we first cash crop was strawberries. Had 5 acres of strawberries, and we picked strawberries and sold those. The next cash crop was mashed potatoes. We planted them early and harvested them early to take advantage of the Chicago market. We shipped them to Nashville, Tennessee by truck, then loaded potatoes in a railroad car and shipped them to big cities, mainly Chicago, that I knew about. And as I recall, we sold them for 4 cents a pound, $4 a hundred. This was good cash money.
How many people would plant and harvest the crops?
On our farm?
Yes.
On our farm, I had 2 brothers that were older than me. I was the little one. I was the go get the sacks, go get the bucket, go get the crates until I grew up. My older brother was 7 years older than me. My next brother was 5 years older than me. I inherited the job of the girl. I was the water boy, and I was also the dishwasher and the churner, an old-fashioned churn for milk and butter. My mother thought she deserved someone to help her until I got large enough to handle the plows and the team. And my other brothers had to go to school. My 2 brothers had to board in town in their high school time. My middle brother played football, and he came to Oklahoma because my father had brothers here. They came in the oil business. It was more profitable than Tennessee, and Oklahoma was very industrial at that time. And one of my uncles worked for Halliburton. Anyway, my brother came out and he played football at Cameron College in Lawton. After 2 years, he graduated from the 2-year and came to A&M. And he graduated in 1939 from A&M in accounting and entered business with a partner. And that's the reason I came to Oklahoma.
I see.
Because he said, come to Oklahoma. I got through college. I'll show you how to enroll and go to college.
Was he the first in your family to go to college that you're aware of?
Yes, except my father went to a 2-year college and was able to teach in school after 2 years.
Mm.
My mother did not go to a college. She did go to a boarding school.
What did your father teach?
From 4th to 8th grade,
Everything.
he was the teacher in a 2-room schoolhouse.
And was he your teacher as well?
No, he only taught 2 years and got married and decided he preferred farming.
I see, I see. So to back up a little bit, what was school like growing up?
School was, a lot of it was babysitting for me.
Hmm.
My first 2 teachers, I loved them, and it was just babysitting, it seems like. I learned the ABCs and the alphabet, and I learned to count, but I didn't learn very much.
I understand.
We lived in the country. A lot of the times the best teachers would get jobs in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Where there was more pay and better working conditions.
Did that change as you got older?
At the end of my 3rd year, in my brothers' lives and in my life, I was the last one. So in my 3rd grade, the schools consolidated. Where I had to go to school was about 4 miles, but there was a grade school in another county, and since our land was divided between 2 counties, I was eligible to go to either county I wanted to.
I see.
My parents sent me to the little school, still 2-room school.
Mm.
My 4th grade, I transferred to the school. I had to walk 3 miles.
What was that like, having to walk to school every day?
Pretty weather, it was all fun. We would meet other kids and play on the way.
I see.
In the fall of the year, we would find apple trees along the way with apples to eat. And wintertime, we skated on ice in the ponds because it would seem to be colder than it is now. And ice would get about 2 inches thick, and we would skate and sometimes get to school late.
Sounds fun.
If you got there too early, you had to build the fire yourself
Oh.
in the winter.
Did you carry your lunch to school with you?
Yes. My mother worked hard to have biscuit. Usually it was biscuit and sausage, biscuit and ham, and jelly and peanut butter. She also would put in a baked sweet potato, which I seldom would eat, but she never knew it.
So did you stay at that school throughout high school as well?
No, I stayed through the 8th grade. There was 7 people in my 8th grade in that school. After I graduated, I went one direction, and my classmates went another direction to high school.
I see.
I rode a transportation which was a wagon, covered wagon, the first year. And that was a 2-year high school. The second year, we had a bus. The bus was a 1.5-ton truck with a box on the back with a door in the back end. Get in. And after 2 years, then that 2-year school was consolidated into the 4-year school in the town there.
Which was more comfortable, the wagon or the bus?
The bus was more comfortable. It was faster and warmer.
See. And what year did you graduate high school again?
1938.
1938. During that time, did you have any teachers that you remember particularly well?
Yes, the principal taught Latin. I was in my second year Latin. I was not proficient in it, and I did not pass. So I lost my first year of Latin and my second year because to get credit you had to have the second year.
Let's see.
Probably I didn't have many favorite teachers, and the football coach taught history, and that was an easy course. Typing was the easy course. English was probably my hardest course because I lived at the end of the road as far as the bus was concerned, and our neighborhood was close, and we all spoke the same language. You could probably say dialect. When I came to OSU, a lot of the words I used, they didn't know the meaning of or didn't understand how I was using them.
I see.
My spelling was different. I spelled phonetically, and sometimes I didn't spell correctly. And my English teacher struggled with me my first 2 years of college here.
So how did you get to OSU?
I left Tennessee in August, latter part of August, I think it was, and hitchhiked. Highway 64. 64 highway went through my hometown, and it also is 12 miles north of Stillwater, the old Highway 64. I followed it and hitchhiked from Tennessee. I hitchhiked not only the first year, but I went home for Christmas, and I went home at the end of my second year.
How long did it take you to get here?
Usually I spent the night on the road one night.
That's fairly quick.
Oh, as I mentioned earlier, I would notice I would be trailing the Greyhound bus because Highway 64 was the main thoroughfare, and I would get a ride and they would drive faster because the bus would stop and pick up a passenger at small stop places or bus stops. I would get ahead, then I'd lose my ride and I'd get on the highway and the bus would pass me, but I kept up with the bus usually.
Okay. So did you receive any type of scholarship or anything to OSU?
No. The first year I I came to Stillwater with a small amount of money, which I spent all of it enrolling and buying my books the first semester. And living with my brother, my food and housing was paid for. For spending money, I did odd jobs. And finally, I established a cookie route. I bought cookies from Crest Company out of Chickasha, Oklahoma for 10 cents a pound, and I sold them for 20. These were fancy cookies, and sandwich cookies and various kinds. And I bought vanilla wafers by the large, can't think of the word, but bulk. And I finally was able to sell to the college. The college operated a cafeteria type, also in some of the dorms, but the cafeteria sold vanilla wafers too, and they made banana pudding. And that got me spending money. I would buy them in bulk, take orders by the pound, and I put them in sacks. And I'd not bicycled every street in town, and as soon as I found who would buy cookies and who wouldn't, and I would take orders as I delivered. I'd take orders for the next week.
Interesting. So you were a young entrepreneur. Yes,
I learned much in that experience of selling cookies. Of course, I had some experience as a farm boy selling vegetables in a town.
Oh.
I knew what you had to do. I envied a boy who had the franchise to sell margarine. In 1939, you bought margarine in the white, as a white substance, in a sack or in a box. That came with that was a small coloring you had to do yourself. Mix it up to make it look like butter. That was a restriction due to agriculture and competition with butter. They fought each other. But he had a good route, and he just put that on the doorstep, and he didn't have to. He had a regular route. And he worked his way through school selling margarine.
Did you have any competition in the cookie business?
They were selling my kind of cookies in the grocery store for 18 cents. Everybody thought I was making 2 cents a pound, but I was making 10 cents a pound.
Wow.
An interesting thing developed which helped me in my food and support. I found a lady had 3 boys, and they had a milk cow which they staked out on Virginia Street down here, close to town. Virginia comes through, and it was a grassy area, and they would stake the cow out. They milked the cow, and she had extra milk. I traded cookies for milk. And she says, no, they don't have to be the same, or they don't have to be, if you have broken ones that you can't sell, that will work. My kids will eat them. So I traded cookies for a gallon of milk. She would know the day I was coming. Didn't lock her house. I would take the cookies and put on the table and get a gallon of sweet milk. If she didn't have sweet milk, she would have buttermilk. And we found ways of using both the buttermilk and the sweet milk. So I exchanged cookies, no money, for milk. we would make, my brother was a fair cook. We would go across the street for 25 cents. We could buy a minute steak, a quart of milk, and we had flour. We'd fry the steak and drink the milk and have gravy, gravy to eat with the steak.
I see. So during all this time studying and catching up in your English classes and working, what did you do to relax?
I worked.
You worked to relax?
I wasn't working, I was studying or sleeping.
I see.
We had a very small apartment. One room was living room and bedroom. It was actually a garage converted to an apartment. Housing was very tight, and I think the enrollment may have been 10,000, short of 10,000.
Wow.
I've forgotten. The bathroom was between this apartment and another one just like it that faced the alley. On hot nights, I slept under a tree on a cot. Many people did in the hot weather. No fear, nothing was ever locked. One thing I can tell you that I did that you can't do now. I had a bicycle for my business of cooking cookies. I could ride the bicycle to Morrill Hall, put the bicycle down, go in, and get to talking after class and visiting, and I'd go out the other door and go home and forget my bike. It would be there the next day or the next day. Was not stolen.
Wow.
I could leave a book in the restroom, forget it, it'd be there the next day. Honesty was practiced. And it's so sad you can't do it anymore.
That's very true. So, talk a little bit about your path to the military, if you don't mind.
Okay. After 2 years of college, I ran out of money. The second year I lived with Dean McIntosh, and his wife was a Pi Phi alum. She had many activities. She thought I should pledge a fraternity. I said, I have no money. She says, I'll pay you a fee. But she didn't pay all of it. I ran out of money. Went to Muncie, Indiana to work for the summer of '41. I got a job working for Ball Brothers. Went to work at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and off at 11, which was very... I didn't lose any sleep. Didn't know hardly I was working to save money to come back. Well, my job was so good, I was making as much money at the factory as my brother was making in accounting business, in his business. So I worked in the summer, but I kept thinking I could continue to work for a year, and I could pay for my schooling, my last 2 years. So I did. I did not enroll in September '41, did not come back to college. Continued to work, saving money to pay my way through school. December 7th, 1941, we were attacked by Japan. That changed everything for me. I was 21, waiting for the next draft. I continued to work until the first part of 42.
Okay.
And it was, I could see that I was going to be drafted, soon have to go in service, so I volunteered for the Navy. While I was, during the summer, my schedule for working, as I mentioned, from 3 to 11 at night, I had the mornings free, so I enrolled in a private aviation school.
So
It wasn't so sophisticated, but it gave me knowledge of aviation and of engines and the working of an aircraft. When I enrolled in the Navy, we took tests in San Diego. That's where I did boot camp.
Camp Pendleton?
I don't remember. I think that's right. I forget.
Okay.
It was just, I was doing the job then. I don't know where.
Right.
But it was in San Diego. We took exam and listed some of the things background. And I was able to put this schooling on my resume. Well, as they were sorting out people to go to school, I got a school from my experience in college. And then that was in Millington, Tennessee. Then from Millington, Tennessee, I went to San Francisco, where I was assigned to my military duties overseas.
I see. So to back up just a little bit, on December 7th, 1941, you were working on that day? Or do you remember that day?
Saturday or Sunday?
It was
Wasn't it
on
a Sunday?
It
I was all closed on Sunday.
Do you remember, what was your reaction whenever you first heard it, other than, oh, well, I'm probably going to
I hardly knew where Hawaii was. It was a foreign country as far as I'm concerned. But I had friends already had gone to Europe. I knew there was a big war in Europe, but I didn't know what was going on in the Pacific. And it was strange. And I didn't know whether to be drafted or what to do. I talked to some of the men in my factory where I was working. And one old gentleman says, join the Navy, you always have a table to eat on. Well, that wasn't necessarily true in my situation. And some of the tables on the board ships, the landing craft and stuff wasn't very good either.
Right.
So it was a scary time, and the feelings was that probably never come back. Now that may sound strange, but those feelings were present. I had to go somewhere. It was my duty. And I had cousins to be killed in the Bulge in Europe. So it wasn't very pleasant. But I did it. In fact, I went to see the movie Mrs. Miniver, I believe it's right. Anyway, after that, I'm going to enlist. So from San Francisco, I went to New Caledonia. I didn't know where it was. Well, it's down by Australia, just east of Australia. Way out south of the lower end from Japan on the islands.
So how did you get there, by ship?
Yes, there were 23 sailors who went in a group. We went on a ship that was converted from hauling sugarcane from the islands Central America, to the U.S., to New Orleans. It was 2 decks in we had a load of airplanes, new airplanes for the Navy aboard ship.
Which airplanes?
Corsair.
Yes, sir.
And D something dive bomber. The wings would all fold. The wings were folded in this case. That's the reason we were carrying them. The ship was designed for railroad cars. So in the well deck, they let down the planes and rolled them forward and lashed them down to these railroad ties, or not ties, runners.
Yes, sir.
We 23, the ship wasn't designed for personnel, but they said we can handle 20 to 23. So we were surplus. We slept on our bag, blanket from our bag under the airplanes as we drove, or as the ship went from San Francisco, we went south, almost to Galapagos Islands, down below the equator, to avoid the submarines, because we had precious. I don't know whether they considered the personnel, but the airplanes was a precious items.
What year would that have been?
42.
42.
You'll hand me,
Book?
no, that other one. That's 1942. We went to New Caledonia, and from New Caledonia, I was assigned to a unit called Patsu 1-2,
I see.
which was a maintenance crew for aircraft. From New Caledonia, I was assigned to New Hebrides, and right here, I went to this town,
Espiritu Santos.
Espiritu. That was 1942.
Espiritu.
The squadron of planes was first this VP 51. Later they were called VP 1. Here's where I first mentioned my planes. This was, we went to Espiritu here, stayed for about 6 months. Then went to, when we finished or attacked Guadalcanal
Oh, yeah.
and secured it, we lengthened the airstrip. And Guadalcanal was kind of a wet place. So we used the metal covering for the airstrip. Of course, we made a base,
Right.
but it was covered with metal that hooked together.
So you worked on the airbase at Guadalcanal. That's quite famous.
That's where the planes were. That's where our aircraft were.
Oh, I see.
I worked on the aircraft. I was the engineer. And the planes would come, when they'd hit that metal, it'd rattle as they hit it. And it was because the soil was softer. The metal decking, it was stiff and hard metal, but they hooked together and made a solid surface.
Wow.
When it was new, it was perfect. It had holes in it. The design, I don't know whether you ever seen them or not, but after the war, that surplus material was used in many situations. Anyway, I went to Guadalcanal, and there we didn't do any hand-to-hand fighting because we had the planes, and we followed in our situation. We followed the Marines and the Seabees.
Right.
First thing on the islands, the beach was established by shelling from the ships, battleships and gunships and whatever. They just cut the coconut trees off.
What was that like? Did you ever witness that? The shellings?
No, that was ahead of me. That's the first thing.
Right.
The Marines. Then the Marines would, after the shelling, Marines would land, push the Japanese back and push them off of the island. Those stories tell. Next thing we moved in was Seabees. Seabee was a construction group who built. We had to lengthen the airstrip for our planes because they were only using fighters, Zeros, small bombers. We had to lengthen it. So quick as it got available, we would fly in with the B-24s. Stories would tell that the Seabees would ride on their tractors and the Japanese would be in a coconut tree. When the tractor had come by, he'd open fire on him, but never moved particularly. Because the movement, your eyes would catch it. And the guys on the story is the men driving the bulldozers would get down behind the blade on the bulldozer and fire back if they could see where he's coming from.
Wow. That's amazing. Did the Zeros ever strafe the airbase?
Oh, yes. The Zeros didn't, but the bombers would. I did not realize until we was on Guadalcanal and other islands as we moved on to Philippines. I did not realize that there was a full moon every month. The way I realized it, from 10 o'clock on the full moon night, the Japanese would bomb us until 3 o'clock. Because the airstrip usually was made of coral, which is a white rock, usually a whiter light rock. And of course the trees were back, and it usually is in coconut trees or other type trees, greenery, and it would just shine.
Right.
Well, they were trying to hit the planes. Airplanes would be in the bunkers. When I say a bunker, the Seabees would, after they finished the strip, would make a circle and a ridge of dirt around it. Maybe 8-10 feet high. That whenever a bomb would explode close, it would glance off or up. The shrapnel would.
I see.
Well, anyway, until that moon moved over, we wouldn't get much sleep from 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock because they'd be bombing our airstrip and stuff. On New Guinea, we moved from Guadalcanal. We kept moving about every 500 miles to shorten the distance for our patrol. We would send out patrols. The air squadron sent out patrols. I didn't go. Only time I had to fly, not flying the aircraft, but with the plane, was whenever I changed engines. I would ride to see that the engines were functioning right according to the instruments.
And these were on combat missions?
No, there wouldn't be, this would be testing.
Testing. Okay.
After all the engines would be on. I would sit between the pilot and the co-pilot. Oh, well, they let me sit in the co-pilot's deal. That's just fun. But that's like learning to drive a car when you were a 10-year-old.
Right.
But where was I? I've forgotten.
New Guinea.
Oh, New Guinea. Well, that was a bad spot. We found the Japanese Navy was gathering and moving to advance on an island that we had. I assumed it was. So we notified the 5th Army, Air Force, 5th Air Force. They brought in B-25s and parked all along the airstrip. They brought in bombs to put in the B-25s, and they bought fighter planes. We had planes just stuck everywhere. 2 planes, Japanese bombers, came over. That's not so bad. That's not the bad part. The bad part was that the boys that were supposed to put the bombs in the airplanes, they didn't put them in until they got ready to leave, because they put the fuse in at that time. Well, they got smart. The bombs were on a trailer, loose from a truck, but just on stacked high, 500-pound bombs. The guys put the fuse in them the night before. And the bomber came over and hit this with a bomb.
Wow.
It made a hole bigger than this room, pulverized the soil, and it just flew up in the air and came back down as dust almost. There was a foxhole there. 2 or 3 guys was in it. We lost 3 planes of B-24s in that deal. Not from the Japanese bomb, but from the explosion of this trailer of, I don't know, 20 or 30 bombs on it. Blew my tent down. I was in a hole in the ground. I couldn't find where I was. I came out of that tent.
Wow.
I thought we had a stockpile of bombs near, but they weren't fused, so really no danger. But I thought, man, that whole thing blew up.
Wow.
We didn't know what was going on. We went down to the water's edge on the island. This was a small island because we didn't bother with New Guinea. We left the Japanese in it, right around.
We circumnavigated it, yeah.
The airstrip went from water edge to water edge. When a plane was loaded, they would check the speed at midpoint of the strip. If it had a certain speed, they could make it. They'd go off the end of that island and they'd go down below the island. Then here they'd come back up the distance out, the plane would rise. That night that this load of bombs exploded, we went to the water edge to get away from the strip because we thought, well, they're going to, all the firepower and saw what they're doing, they'd be back. Well, they didn't, but we could see out on the water in the moonlight black objects moving. We thought the Japanese were getting ready to invade.
Wow.
What happened was the cargo ships that were bringing us material from the harbor had put their lifeboats out and put the personnel on it and told them to cruise away in case the ship was hit. We thought these, our own people were the Japanese coming to invade. We didn't even have a gun. We didn't have anything.
So, how were you trained to handle situations like that, such as the bombings or in the event of an amphibious invasion from the Japanese? You weren't?
We weren't trained. We were trained to do a job. I was trained to make an engine work or identify trouble with an engine. Take it off, put on a new one. Only one time did I take a cylinder off of one engine and put it on another because the bullet had damaged it. But outside of that, we just put new stuff, new propeller, new governors, new, everything was new. Our parts were flown in the mornings, not every morning, but if they came early in the morning when the Japanese were not active, and leave before, just unload and leave.
So how did the mechanics react during these situations, these dangerous situations?
Hit a hole.
Hit a hole. Oh.
And when I got out of service, I didn't feel comfortable on the 4th of July when there were fireworks unless I was in the ground.
Really?
I got a hole under that office right there that made me feel comfortable.
Wow.
I don't feel that way now, but it took a long while.
Wow. So was there any particularly exciting events or memorable or funny events that happened?
Yes, I followed the islands as we've took them.
Right.
As other people took them, not me.
Right.
We moved from island to island. We moved into Mindanao, in the southern part of the Philippines. I was ready for rotation back to the States because I had been in active duty over 2 years. In 1942, I went in, and in 45, first part of 45, I got my orders to rotate back. And the process then was kind of crude in a way. They 5 of us got our orders, and one guy was responsible for carrying them. You can wait for a ship to come by to take you to the United States on rotation, or you can hitchhike. We chose to hitchhike.
Wow. From around the Philippines?
Yes. Well, it wasn't so bad. As I mentioned, planes would bring parts in the mornings, but they would go back empty generally. So DC-3s, the 2-engine job, the old airplane that was safe and workhorse,
Right.
would bring parts in, and they would leave them and get ready to go. And so we would be ready when a plane come in. Where are you going? We're going back the way we came from, really. So we would catch a plane with 3 hops. First one, I don't know, we flew probably 200 or 300 miles, maybe 500, I don't know. I didn't know where it was. They would always land at a airstrip, and there was a mess hall there, and we usually get there in the evening. We go to the mess hall, get something to eat. The cooks would feed us. We didn't want to check in because if the brass got a hold of us, they would say, wait for the ship or something. We slept on the benches or floor the night and wait, catch another plane going back. We hitchhiked to Guadalcanal. Once we got to Guadalcanal, they had a we call it stateside rotation plan. So we got on the plane. And they didn't know whether we were Marines, or Navy, or Army, because we traded clothes on the islands. We had a job to do, and we had cutoffs.
I see.
And we only had a little bag, one change of clothes. And we landed then, we took the plane back. We did stop at Johnson Island from Guadalcanal to San Francisco to refuel. Johnson Island, they said, we're going to stop for fuel. The pilot came over and started looking, there's no land down there. One coconut tree in an island. It was a fueling place, but it was the right distance between for refueling. We landed there, then we came on into Hamilton Field. I believe it's Hamilton Field in Hawaii. Then we had a meal there. We flew into San Francisco, got in there about 8 o'clock one morning. I don't know what. I was assigned to a school in Chicago. I've been working on the planes, but they sent me to specialize in propellers and governors. You know, propeller changes in the air, pitch. There was a Curtis Electric, Hamilton hydraulic, and we had 6 weeks, I believe, of special training. And there I hit it lucky. I've been doing all that on the job. So in the class with the new people, I could do all the work.
Oh, yeah.
I knew how to put them back together. We were taking apart, putting together, safety wiring. You know, a safety wire has to wire the nuts through a hole. Twist it. If I made the person that had the class got free passes to go to town or shore, we'd call it, on the weekend.
Oh, yeah.
I never worked. I went to town.
So what kind of things did you do in town?
Oh, I like to go to the Parthenon to dance on the north side. They had a serviceman to get in free, and he could take his date if he had a date. And we had we danced, and food. That's about all. A girlfriend.
All right, picking back up where we left off, you were discussing your R&R.
Yeah, after the school, they gave me a few days off to visit my parents in Tennessee. I don't remember how much anyway. Then back to Chicago, then back to San Francisco. So what are you going to do? Well, we need you. You've had experience. We're sending you back overseas. So you'd never send me back overseas. I tried to fake an illness and it didn't work too well. And they finally assigned me, and I said, well, I've been in the battles and I've been to school. I think I deserve another rank. So they advanced me one notch. But they sent me back, and I went to Hawaii. And from the main island on Hawaii, I was assigned to Maui. This was probably about April or May of 45.
Okay.
So there I worked on airplanes from aircraft carriers and local training planes that they had on Maui.
Okay, so
That was easy living.
I bet it was. So, do you remember the day that Germany surrendered?
No, I remember the 5th of August, I believe, is that Japan was surrendered.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay, so before we get to that, so you were in Guadalcanal, you went to New Guinea,
Yeah.
which we bypassed. So can you take me along the path? Were you with MacArthur's advance up those islands?
Well, I didn't know what the Army was doing. I had one job, keep the planes flying, and I stayed busy with my job.
Okay.
I didn't know what was going on.
Well, you ended up toward the Philippines.
Oh
right?
yeah, well, when we moved to Mindanao, I was ready to come back.
Mm.
It just happened that I was in the move. I wasn't there long.
So, do you remember anything from significant during those 2 years that you'd like to talk about?
The 2 years where?
From Guadalcanal to the Philippines?
Oh, well, we just hop in the islands whenever we would secure, whenever the Marines and the Army and whoever secured the islands, we would move to, as long as it was reasonably safe. We couldn't get out of bombing range or strafing or anything like that. But hand-to-hand combat, I didn't ever see any.
Right. So, take me through a typical day while you're in the field as a mechanic.
Okay. Well, the planes would come in the evening. They would file a report on the plane. The pilot or co-pilot or whoever was in charge. Certain engines not performing right. The generator's not generating. The report would say what was wrong. If there was emergency, like the Japanese Navy was moving, when the plane cooled off enough to work on it, the engine I'm talking about,
Right.
we would work as long as there's a light. And if it was a bombing deal, we'd shut the lights off and head for the foxholes away from the planes. Because they wanted to hit the planes. I don't think they were trying to hit us. Actually, it would have been worse if they hit the camp instead of the planes. Planes could be replaced. If a plane was scheduled for hourly maintenance, 60, 120 hours, or whatever the hours were, there were certain duties that you did whether they needed or not.
Mm.
Those planes usually would have a day off work, or maybe 2 days or so, whatever it took to do it.
Let's see.
We would go to work in the morning, 7 or 8 o'clock, work until it was done, or usually the work was never done. There's a plane sitting and warning something, but you work till evening time. There could be some pleasant days. And if the work was not too heavy, maybe you could go to the beach and swim. Not often. I know in Guadalcanal, one of the guys got a Japanese Jeep. And it wasn't clocked in anywhere. They was letting us use that to go to the beach because it didn't have to be accounted for. I don't know what happened for it when we moved. I don't know whether it stayed or somebody else got it or what.
Interesting.
We had, if the island seemed to be fairly secure, we had entertainment sometimes come from the state, USO.
Right.
Hollywood,
Bob Hope and all.
Bob
those.
Hope or somebody.
Yeah.
Those were big times. As far as I can remember, we never did have an air raid when that was on. But they wouldn't come unless it seemed fairly quiet. I remember eating mutton, lamb chops.
Oh yeah.
I ate so many lamb chops I didn't want to see one. From New Zealand or Australia or somewhere. New Zealand, mainly I think it came from. But it was food. Sometimes when the Seabees were working, we'd get acquainted with the Seabee and we'd visit his camp. He'd have fresh eggs. We ate dry eggs. Powdered eggs, I should say.
Oh yeah. Did you guys have the sea rations like the other troops did?
On traveling days we did, like we were moving from island to island when it wasn't convenient. We didn't have a cook shack set up or anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you make any long-lasting friendships?
Oh yeah. And you, after a while, you knew the guys that were quieter, not disturbing you in their sleep and what have you. And maybe not even smokers as far as that's concerned. However, cigarettes were free. I smoked for 4 years. Free. I had a hard time quitting when I got back. Sometimes we'd get hot beer. I didn't drink beer, and I probably shouldn't tell this, but I sold my beer 50 cents a bottle. I was the money changer for the group a lot of times.
Let's see.
I didn't smoke, and I didn't draw my pay from the pay chart. I wasn't married, didn't have to send it home from my parents or anything. I just let it accumulate. I had the biggest balance on the school board. They'd post it, no place to spend it. Some of the guys played poker. Sometimes they get in a tight spot. They would won't borrow $10. Loan them $10, pay you back payday. I stand ahead of the line payday and collect my money.
Did you charge interest?
No,
Oh.
$10 was, they'd only have it a couple of weeks or a month.
Let's see. So you wasn't a gambling man?
No, I'd lose. I was afraid I'd lose what I had.
I heard that.
I saved my money. When I got out, I wanted a new car. And I signed up every place to buy a new car. Never could buy one until February of '48. Yeah. I bought a Chevrolet convertible apple red with a white top.
So I like to ask this question,
All right.
particularly to veterans, and that question is, Throughout your experience, what are some of the greatest things that you've seen as far as humanity?
Well, I would have to say, in general, the person that you could trust, honesty, friendship, lasting friendship. I saw a lot of guys go to the bad. There were a lot of temptations. A lot of it, some of it was while I was in the United States. At the camps, the girls were too friendly, and a lot of guys got in trouble. Unhappy situations developed. Overseas, sometimes the men would didn't know how to entertain themselves. Didn't like the job. It was just unhappy. You know what they drink? Torpedo juice with grapefruit juice.
So what is torpedo juice?
They thin it down with grapefruit juice.
What's torpedo juice?
You take it out of the torpedoes.
Wow.
It's, I don't know, it's a chemical, liquid chemical.
Wow.
We had a guy that they some of the guys knew how to fix it, mix it with some kind of juice or something. This guy drank some, and it was his day off, and he went to bed, and he drowned in his own vomit, laying on his back. He was out, so he didn't know what he was doing. Sad deal. And it's just one of those things, you didn't say no. And it was tempting. I remember one time, Army boys came through with a jug of wine. They're selling it. Me and another guy were off duty that day, and they came by. I don't know, they wanted $20 or something. We both, anyway, we bought it. We drank a little bit of it. And it belonged to, the substance belonged to, or it was made by a guy that lived just 2 or 3 tents from us. We were having a shower, in the shower, having a good time, sliding and falling down. He found out it was his. We gave it back to him. He didn't have it. We've had our fun. But they try to manufacture their own alcohol. Yeah.
You okay? Do you need a break?
No, I was doing what I do sometimes to relax. I was sticking my leg over the arm here.
I understand. So it seems like that was one of the most problematic aspects, was what you just discussed. So I'm hesitant to ask, what are some of the darker aspects of humanity?
One evening we were on Hamahara before we moved to Guadalcanal. The squadron, plane squadron group, I think it's about 8 men in it, pilot and gunners, 2 side gunners, and tail gunner, and nose gunner, top gunner. They had sank a ship, Japanese ship. They came back a celebrating. They came over the camp. They came back at supper time, which was the end of the day. And we heard the plane coming. We knew it was low. They came low over the camp, hollering out to me, hey, yeah, 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 yeah. And they hit a downdraft or something, and the plane dropped, and the propellers hit a coconut tree. Coconuts in the top. You know, they're a bunch like that. And that plane just went right down and killed all of them.
Oh my.
Celebrating, but overdid it.
It's terrible.
Everybody, it was like a football game. If you sink a ship, hooray! In fact, the planes had put a torpedo on, or paint a ship, picture of a ship, on the side of the plane, how many that they had sank, or small gunner, or whatever. Anything to brag about.
I see.
So it was a good thing that turned bad.
I see.
The pilot was a crazy pilot. Well, some of the crazy guys made the best pilots.
Mm-hmm.
They took danger. They didn't know danger.
Did you get to talk to many pilots or other servicemen beyond the mechanics who were your friends? Did you make any friends with other people?
Oh, well, if I had to fly with the plane, get acquainted. They generally ate in the mess hall before the crew, the working crews did, because they had to get out and get going.
Mm-hmm.
No, not many. I had, I lost, one of my buddies died, lived in Tulsa. Hudson Volley Turner, he was one of the guys in the camp. Tim, close friend. But when we came back, disappeared. One of the guys in the tent lived in Kansas City. He went to Kansas City, too far for me to keep track of. Oh, well, when I came back, I went back to school. And I got out in December of '45. I enrolled in OSU in January of '46. Mm. We went to school every day except Sunday. I took courses in August, which is supposed to be vacation time. We were very crowded when all the GIs came back.
Right. So before we get to OSU, you said that you do remember the day that Japan surrendered. What was that like? The feeling?
The day of the bombing, you mean?
Right, or the atomic bombing, or the days after where Japan surrendered.
Oh. Well, I was in Hawaii then.
Right.
I wasn't on the front line, so there was a different feeling. Hawaii was a holiday deal. It was over. Well, the first thing you started thinking then is, what am I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
The military, by all rights, brought back the front line first, at least tried to, except what they needed to maintain, but they relieved the older ones, or the longer ones. So, from August to December, they were just babysitting me. We did woodwork. I got a piece of woodwork around here somewhere I did in Hawaii out of teak wood. We did, we had courses we could take, like appreciation of music.
Oh.
I thought, how can you make money out of appreciation of music? Anyway, it was passing time. We had a woodworking shop, had these little courses. I don't remember any other than the appreciation of music, and I don't know what else. Anyway.
So I've heard a lot of perspectives on World War II veterans about the atomic bomb. Do you have anything you care to share about it?
Well, it ended the war. What I was afraid of when I went back the second time, that we were preparing to go into Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the end of it. You didn't know whether you were going to get back or not. Because when they're shooting at you as well as you shooting at them, who's going to get killed first is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
The atomic bomb ended. Well, good enough for you. It's over. I wasn't concerned about what it did. I knew it was bad, but I was looking at number one.
So you're glad?
Selfishly or whatever. Japan was still far away. I didn't set any foot on Japanese soil.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't there. I'm sure other people would have other ideas. But I was serious about my job, and I tried to stay serious about it until it was over in Hawaii. That was kind of a fun time.
Interesting. So you'd been saving up throughout the war years. What were your plans whenever you got out of the military?
Well, I lost my girlfriends. I'd gotten Dear John letters. You know what a Dear John letter?
Yes, sir. Do you want to describe that in case someone's reading?
I've forgotten it. You forget things and let it go.
Do you want to know if I read that? Thank you.
What'd you ask me?
Well, you were talking about Dear John letters.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you're away 3 or 4 years from someone, you forget unless you're... I didn't want to get married. I made up my mind. I'm not getting married until this is over.
I see. So is that how you kept in contact with home? Was through letters and...
Wrote letters to my parents. My mother almost went crazy because I had to go overseas. And last time I'll see you and this, that, and that. And
They're still a recording. It's a video audio thing.
I
The
wrote letters to my parents, to my brother here. Then you asked a question a while ago, what were your plans?
Yes, sir. What were your plans?
Well, I had started getting serious. I didn't get killed, so I've got a future.
Yes, sir.
What is that future going to be? I did ask my dean that I lived with, Dean McIntosh, what's going on in the States with education? I didn't know anything about the GI Bill. That wasn't known in the service particularly. And he told me about that, and I need to get with it. Then what am I going to study? After the war, I didn't know really what I was going to do, but they gave me a book. And in the book it read what was kind of new, like now it would be technology, you get into technology.
Yes.
Well, accounting was fairly new. Income tax of any employer. It started in 1913. But Social Security didn't start until 1937. and that was government. And farmers were not covered until 1954. So that was a new area, income tax. So I went into income tax. I started to work. I got married on May the 31st, the day I graduated from OSU. Went to work on Monday because they needed me. It was getting, business was picked up and I was needed.
What changed? Why with the marriage aspect?
Well, you know, a lot of times you don't know how lucky you are. She and I went to school the last 2 years together. I carried her books to class.
Oh, yeah.
We lived close together in an apartment building. And I was 28 and she was 9 years younger. But she went through high school in 3 years and went through college in 3 years. And I recognized the brain she had. Mm. And she was a poor girl and she knew how to work. She knew how to cook. She knew everything that I needed. So we got married the day I graduated. She liked 1 year graduating. So we rented a house, $40 a month. And she walked to campus and I walked to work. And as I told you, I bought a convertible.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I kept it, got married, we took a honeymoon in it. And they started making new cars where other people were buying them. So I put a for sale sign on it. I lost $150 on it. I paid $2,300 for it and sold it for 21 something. And so I did good. Then I had cash in my pocket. And I got a $750 car. And she finished school in 49. She was too young to sit for the CPA, so she had to wait, and she passed the CPA. And she worked with me at the office, accounting office. Mm-hmm. Do you want to hear this part too?
I want to hear it. Whatever you want to tell me about.
She worked for 7 years. Then we started a family. Adopted a girl, a baby. Then we had a boy in 15 months. After the children came, she stayed at home. Took account of to whether and kept active. Kept her business up, kept her certificate live and everything. And she still works. When we bought this house in 1969, we built the office in a storm cellar underneath it. And she continued to work. Life has been good to us. We're fortunate.
Any words of wisdom for a young man about to get married next week?
I have a lot of wisdom, a lot of advice. Some of it you may like, some you may not. Well, my brother told me before I got married, says, marry the girl that thinks you are the best and really loves you. And things work out. Well, that proved okay. That proved good. Keep your life clean. I've lived a Christian life, not perfect, but I realized when I made mistakes and tried to correct them. You can never undo your sin, and you may never forget it, but you can always remember that it's not good and prevent it again. That's social living together. Give and take. There are jobs that go along nowadays in the maintaining a household. If a wife works, that doesn't mean that you have a holiday when you came home or when you're not working. Both of you are still working until you go to bed.
I see.
You share. Sometimes you wish they wouldn't share so much, but then there's other times you're happy that they did.
I see.
Financially, start your retirement when you start to work. First thing that you can buy would be your household, your house. Renting is all right. Renting is good until you are stable, fixed. I'm speaking from my standpoint.
Yes, sir.
I rented for a couple of years. Then I got in the house building business and built a house, moved in, and at that time they kept going up. That's the first house was $9,500. Second house was $14,500. There are a lot of lessons to be learned financially.
Yes, sir.
Start saving early. Put it where it will grow. I desired early in my life to create an income equal to my income. You understand what I'm saying? Create assets, capital that's producing, whether it's rental or some source of income. What if you can't work? This new fella can maintain your life.
I see.
I started that early. After I paid for my first and second house. Well, after I got my house paid for.
Mm-hmm.
That was first, because I didn't want, if I lost my job, they couldn't move me out. I could mortgage it and get some money.
Right.
So it's a source of income. It didn't come easy. I had to be careful, but being in finance and accounting, I knew those things.
You built this house, correct?
Not this one. I built this add-on here. We bought this house in 1969 for $34,500.
And you said that you added the storm cellar?
Of course, I moved in. I spent the money to build that office and a storm cellar underneath, and it attached to the house there.
There was one thing I wanted to go back to. You mentioned that during the 4th of July you like to go into your cellar. What other things were hard to overcome after the war to adjust back to being a civilian?
Well, that was the thing that bothered me emotionally. The other thing was that I kept track of was the change in economics. What's the future? How can I stay active in the future? Now, I can relate to what happened to me, but I can't necessarily tell you what to get in from here on.
I see.
My first side income was real estate. I bought a $3,000 house and reworked it myself. Sold it for a little more. I invested in a duplex. Inflation helped some. So I invested in real estate. One time I had about 15 rentals. Then I had 3 trailer parks. 2 of them small, one 20 unit and one 12 unit. Then I had one for 128 unit. I improved those, but the thing I watched was the change in the use of mobile homes for rental. At that time, a person would buy a unit and move it onto my lot. I didn't invest in the house itself.
I see.
I only had the lot. So I had rent. When I moved off, I didn't have necessarily any expenses. I didn't have income, but didn't have expenses.
I see.
I did that as long as I could maintain them myself. There's, in rental, you have electrical problems. So there's an electrician. You have plumbing problems, it's a plumber. You have yard care, that's yard people, and usually that's where you start yourself. You become the yard man. You do all the easy plumbing that doesn't require a certified plumber. You change your lights, switches, and light bulbs and what have you. You become a repairman. You repair your screen doors. You do your own painting. Well, you got all these other jobs. When are you going to do them? After your regular job. So the guys working along with me didn't like my idea. You're working all the time. When are you going to do anything? They don't have anything either. So it's a burden. It's what you plan to do. I developed my partner, financial partner over here. He's taking care of me now. I've sold all my real estate. I'm in the invested in the stock market. What else can you invest in? And sit in this chair. I can't do rental. I got one apartment building, 3 apartments in it. That's all I want. I get rid of if it wasn't for income tax. I could give it to my son, but he's got all he can do too. So how are you going to prepare for retirement is a big question. You see it on TV and it's real. I'm not sure the government's going to be able to take care of you like they have in the past. I draw Social Security. I could live without it. There's a lot of people that cannot. They didn't know how to be their own boss. They didn't know how to run a business. They wanted it now, or they borrowed money that they didn't have so they could have a house like somebody else. You got to sacrifice and be happy.
That sounds like wise words to comment on. So it sounds like to me that you've been very successful in life and you've worked to create that success. Whenever history is written about you, what would you like it to know from your life experience?
I was honest and treated people fairly and made friends and tried to improve the community and the area I live in. Happiness is people. Happiness is not forced to do something. Happiness is being able to take care of yourself. Now, things can happen to a person, and he can't. There needs to be government programs that can help take care of you. But government programs ask for a supervisor who gets big pay, but very little down here. I like to help people. We have what we call food bank at church. Once a month, we give food that'll last at least 2 weeks to about 600 people, families, 600 items, 600 units. You don't know what. You're not allowed to ask many questions. You want to ask, are you working? Do you want a job?
I see.
But you can't do it according to the government. And I like to have neighbors that want to live next to me or close to me. And if you want that, you got to be the same.
See.
You got to share. Be friendly. Be useful. I have a little farm, 40-acre farm out here with a big garden. For 20 years, I had a big garden. And people say, well, why do you have so much garden? What do you do with it? I give it away. Gifts given away make me happier than trying to sell it to say, why don't you take it to farmer's market? Well, this guy over here that I created is keeping me alive and feeding me. I don't need it. If I can make somebody happy, that's my pleasure too.
That's very noble. Is there anything throughout this interview that you wanted to talk about that I haven't asked?
No, I didn't know what you wanted.
All right. Well, if you don't have anything else to add, I guess I'll just say thank you very much for your time, your service to your country, your roles in your community, and your time today.
Well, I appreciate you taking your time. I'm not a very good interviewee.
I think it was great, sir. Thank you very much.